Yoshihiro Togashi's ongoing series, Hunter x Hunter, is the story of a spiky-haired boy, Gon Freaks, who follows in the footsteps of the spiky-haired father he's never known, by becoming a hunter and trying to find his dad. He is the Hunter. Or at least that's what the series was at the start, and if you haven't read or watched it for yourself, then I'll just leave it there to avoid spoiling too much for you. The series gained wide critical acclaim while being one of the most subversive comics run in a weekly Shonen Jump. As for the discussion of whether or not it's deconstructive of the genre the magazine is published in is known for, well, that's not important here. But also no, probably not. Today's topic isn't especially complicated though. As part of the Jump Super Anime Tour in 1998, an OVA for Hunter x Hunter based on the first 2 chapters was made. The OVA was made by Studio Pierrot, who handled adaptations of other Jump manga series before this, most notably Togashi's other biggest work, Yu Yu Hakusho. Because this part of the story actually has 4 iterations of it, this review of the OVA will have some comparisons of it to the others, but I still will be evaluating it based on its own merits. Stick around till the end for some of the more interesting changes. So, without further ado, let's begin. The story begins with Gon fishing for the Master of the Swamp, and he's blue! Look how blue he is! Goodness, it's so not green. Honestly though, he pulls it off. It's an alright look for him, but it will look a little off when he puts the green jacket on, with his hair being blue along the edges. After having successfully captured the Master of the Swamp, Gon gets permission from his Aunt Mito to take the hunter exam as per the rules of their agreement. Gon then goes to spend time with the fox bear he looked after Kon, leading us to how the two met and why Gon wants to become a hunter. Gon in the past was attacked by a fox bear, a cool looking one at that, and is saved by the hunter named Kite. Kite prepares to put down the fox bear cub, but Gon stops him, leading to Kite asking him a question. Gon tells Kon that he'll be leaving, only for Kon to show him that he won't be alone. It was at this point that I realized something. That is definitely Rika Matsumoto voicing Gon. She's awesome, and I might have noticed it sooner if this was released in a better quality. This is only a release on VHS, by the way, but more on that later. But Kon isn't the only one Gon is leaving behind. Mito isn't taking this nearly as well as the fox bear, as indicated by the drunken staggering, but she still shows up the morning of his departure to see him off. During the voyage to the exam, the ship's captain announces that monsters will be appearing in these waters. An hour later, only Gon and 2 others, the tall and bespectacled Leorio and the It's Understandable If You Mistake Him for a Girl, Kurapika, are present to hear the explanation of the exam from the captain. What happened to everybody else? I have a response to this, but I'm saving it for the comparison, meaning I have no segue for this. Anyway, the ship captain asks the 3 of them why they want to become hunters, but Kurapika and Leorio refuse to answer him. The 2 quickly change their tunes. Something unexpected happens as the wind stops and a few crewmen go missing. Leorio and Kurapika, meanwhile, after having managed to get each other all riled up in the 3 minutes they've spoken to each other, start a fight. They don't get very far, however, as a giant sea monster attacks the ship, and... oh wait, they're still fighting. Do they really not see the huge monster that poses a mortal threat to them? Oh, I guess they just don't care. Well, what can I say, other than their fight really doesn't mesh well with this rewrite of the story? This is the only point where I feel like I should bring up a comparison rather than after the summary. The attack by the monster was not present in the manga, and it was likely added to the special so that there would be more action. And it almost works perfectly, but this moment here sticks out like a sore thumb. In the original, the 2 start fighting during a storm. When one of the seamen, Katsuo, falls off the ship, they stop fighting and try to save him. Gon manages to grab his legs, and Leorio and Kurapika grab Gon's legs to keep him from falling off. They chastise him for being so reckless, but he points out that they did save him, leaving the two being able to make amends. Fighting in the middle of a storm while at sea is reckless, sure, but starting a fight, having it be interrupted by a giant monster, and then having the companions just ignore it detracts from the scene's effectiveness somewhat. They do finally stop their fighting after the 12-year-old is flung across the ship. Owen rushes right back in to save the captain, leading to him being saved by Kurapika and Leorio.
なんという無謀な周りを見ずに飛び出すんじゃねえありがとう二人のおかげだよ
The captain tells them that covering the monster's eyes will make its magic disappear and shrink it. The three of them work together and conceal the monster's surprisingly tiny eyes. It's on the top of its head. The monster loses its magic and the crew cheers as the sun rises and our heroes resume their journey to the hunter's exam. So that was Studio Pierrot's Hunter x Hunter. It's pretty good in my opinion. Unlike the last film I reviewed, this one manages to establish its characters' personalities in less than half an hour it spans. There is more action present here than in any other version of the story, but it doesn't really interfere with any of the character or story beats enough to make me say it doesn't work. Story arcs in the main series won't always have a big climax, but for this as a standalone story, it's fine. Some of the artwork and designs can be a little off at points, but it looks fine most of the time, and the animation can be very nice in other places. The scoring is probably the weakest point, however. The music doesn't leave much of an impression. It's mostly forgettable tracks that only seem worthwhile in comparison to the soundtracks for the two television series, as both of them featured music that can stand out on a first listening. But, speaking of comparisons, how does it differ from the three other versions of the story that all don't actually have different names? The most notable difference is the addition of monsters during the adventure on the ship. The monsters that cause people to hallucinate seemed like an unnecessary alteration that didn't really add anything. You might say it's to ease the viewer into the fact that this world has strange creatures that we don't have in our own, but last time I checked we don't have fox bears either. The most you can get out of this edition is describing a scenario in which Kurapika and Leorio are on a boat together, and these monsters that make people horny show up, and then people might think you're talking about a fanfiction. The sea monster, on the other hand, worked out a lot better. I stand by my complaint about it not meshing too well with the fight, but it does manage to be entertaining while accomplishing its goal of adding action to the climax. And another big change that I didn't notice in my first viewing, and one that really didn't have any impact on the special as a standalone story, is the change in Gon's family. Those two aren't dead. I guess I wasn't paying too much attention when first watching this, and I had just assumed they copied and pasted the dialogue for the scene from the manga, but Kite seems to say that both of Gon's parents are alive. All we know about his biological mother is that she and Jing separated sometime before Jing returned to Whale Island. Even then, that fact wasn't revealed until a chapter released the following year. This obviously doesn't have any impact on the story here as neither of them show up, but I'm curious as to why this was something that had to be changed. The other part of this change happens when Gon leaves Whale Island. In the manga, this is where Mito admits that she lied to Gon and that his dad didn't abandon him, and that she actually won custody of Gon in court. This part of the scene is replaced with Again, this doesn't have any real impact on the story here, but its mission seemed pointless. One last thing I'd like to talk about before the wrap up is the voice cast. Everyone turns in a good performance, but there's some trivia that I felt compelled to share here. And by compelled, I mean just thought it was interesting. I have a problem not telling people trivia. I've already mentioned Rika Matsumoto, an actress who's had a consistent role to portray since the late 90s, but she's not the only one. The actress portraying Mito here is Akemi Okamura, the voice of Nami from One Piece. What's interesting about her being in this OVA is that this was released alongside a One Piece OVA, Defeat Him, the Pirate Gunsack. That OVA was one of the 2 times in over 20 years that Nami wouldn't be voiced by Okamura, as she wouldn't take on the role until the following year when Toei Animation's television series premiered. In that TV series, Nami's mother Bellamere was portrayed by Noriko Hidaka, the voice of Kurapika in this OVA. Hidaka is also notable for being one of the few actors to be in more than one anime for Hunter x Hunter. Years later, she would take on the character of Shalnark in Madhouse's TV series. Finally, speaking of Madhouse's adaptation, the voice of the ship captain, the late Kenji Utsumi, would reprise his role 13 years later. As far as I am aware, this was the only role across all 3 Hunter x Hunter anime to have the same actor play the same character more than once. Studio Pierrot's Hunter x Hunter is pretty good, and possibly my favorite animated version of the first 2 chapters. Nippon Animation's version is the runner-up. I have some gripes with them making Mito Gon's actual aunt on his mother's side instead of Jing's cousin, but that's a discussion for another time. And I really dig some of the atmosphere they create to go along with the slower pacing of those episodes. Madhouse's version is Dad's last because despite how much I love that show and the fact that it is one of my favorite TV shows, removing the flashback with Kite and holding off on replacing it until he enters the story in the present was a terrible idea. What's unfortunate here is that the official availability of these 3 in the West gets worse the older the anime is. The Madhouse series is available for streaming on multiple sites, and has a currently ongoing Blu-ray release from Viz Media. Viz Media also put out the earlier Nippon Animation TV series on DVD, but not any of the follow-up OVA series. In addition to those DVDs going out of print, the series is not available for streaming outside of fans uploading it to YouTube. These uploads at least have been left alone by the rights holders for years. This is also sadly the fate of Studio Pierrot's OVA, except it never even made it to the West or any Japanese release better than a limited VHS release. And that is a shame. I've mentioned a few of the hiccups, but this special was very well made. It's a shame that we'll likely never see this without it being marred by the low quality of its only release aside from its initial screening as part of the anime tour. It's not too hard to find, and if you can get past the poor quality, it's something I can easily recommend to people who are already fans of the series or might be interested in checking it out. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, press the like button, or subscribe to see more from this channel. New content comes out monthly.